Imagine working tirelessly, putting your heart and soul into a job, only to have your efforts dismissed by a boss who can't see past their own prejudice. That's exactly what happened to one woman whose career was derailed by an unfair demotion. Her boss, someone who seemed to relish power, made it clear he thought she didn't belong in a leadership role. The demotion was a crushing blow, but she didn't let it define her. What he didn't know was that she had more determination and resilience than he could ever imagine. Instead of giving up, she quietly began rebuilding her career, proving herself in ways he never saw coming. Weeks later, an unexpected twist turned the tables in a way no one could have predicted, and suddenly, the employee became the boss. What happened in those weeks? How did she rise above the unfairness and claim a position of power over the man who had tried to hold her back? Stick around, because this story is one you won't want to miss. The demotion hit harder than she expected. She had poured years of dedication into the company, skipping holidays, working late nights, and solving problems no one else could handle. To be told her efforts weren't enough by a boss who seemed to judge her more for who she was than what she did? It wasn't just insulting, it was devastating. But she didn't let her frustration show, not in front of him. She simply nodded, accepted the new role with grace, and walked out of his office feeling the weight of injustice pressing down on her chest. Her co-workers noticed the change immediately. Some offered her quiet words of encouragement, while others, wary of getting involved, kept their distance. The new position was a step down in every way: less authority, fewer responsibilities, and even a smaller office. It was hard not to feel like the walls were closing in. But she wasn't one to wallow. If there was one thing she knew, it was how to persevere. Determined to prove her worth once again, she threw herself into the work she had left. Even in her reduced role, she quickly became indispensable, picking up the slack where others faltered and finding solutions to problems before they even landed on her desk. Her skills were undeniable, and it didn't take long for others outside her department to notice. Quietly, she began building alliances, earning the trust and respect of people who could see her value even if her boss couldn't. Meanwhile, the boss, let's call him Mr. R, seemed to relish her demotion. He didn't just ignore her accomplishments, he actively downplayed them. In meetings, he would interrupt her, dismiss her ideas, or take credit for them outright. To some, it might have seemed personal. To her, it was a clear reminder of the biases she had been battling her entire career. But Mr. R wasn't untouchable. Unbeknownst to him, a storm was brewing. The company had been struggling in recent months, and upper management was keeping a close eye on every department. Rumors of a shakeup were spreading, and whispers about leadership changes filled the halls. Mr. R, confident in his position, paid little attention to the warnings. He had been at the company for years, climbing the ranks through sheer force of personality and connections. As far as he was concerned, he was untouchable. Then, an unexpected opportunity presented itself. One of the company's largest clients had an urgent project, a make-or-break deal that required someone with vision and strategic expertise. Upper management needed someone reliable, someone who could take the reins and deliver under pressure. Mr. R was the obvious choice, or so everyone thought. But when his past performance was scrutinized, cracks began to show. His tendency to delegate important tasks, his inability to foster collaboration, and his habit of overlooking talented employees all came to light. It was clear to those at the top that he wasn't the leader they needed for this high-stakes project. And that's when her name came up. Despite the demotion, her reputation had remained intact among those who truly mattered. The whispers of her quiet resilience and proven results had reached the right ears. After a tense deliberation, she was offered the chance to lead the project. It was a risky move, putting someone who had just been demoted in charge of such a critical deal, but those who had worked with her knew she was more than capable. When the announcement was made, the office was buzzing. Mr. R's smug demeanor faltered for the first time. He couldn't believe it. How could someone he had pushed down be chosen for a role of such importance? For her, the opportunity was bittersweet. She wasn't just doing this to prove Mr. R wrong, she was doing it for herself, to show that no amount of bias could keep her down. As the weeks went on, the project became a battlefield. The client was demanding, the timeline was tight, and the stakes couldn't have been higher. She worked day and night, assembling a team of the best people she could find, some from her old department, others from areas of the company she had never worked with before. Together, they tackled each challenge head-on, impressing the client with their creativity and efficiency. But Mr. R wasn't done yet. From behind the scenes, he tried to undermine her, questioning her decisions and subtly planting doubts in the minds of others. It was a test of her patience and resolve. Each time he threw an obstacle in her path, she found a way around it, refusing to let his pettiness derail her progress. The tension between them was palpable, but she refused to give him the satisfaction of reacting. One day, as she was finalizing a key part of the project, she overheard Mr. R speaking to another manager. His voice was low, but his words cut through the air like a knife. "She won't last," he said. "They'll see she's not up to it soon enough." That night, as she sat alone in her office, the weight of everything hit her. The long hours, the constant scrutiny, and the pressure to succeed were taking their toll. But instead of breaking, she used it as fuel. She thought about every person who had ever doubted her, every door that had been slammed in her face, and every time she had been told she wasn't enough. She wasn't just fighting for herself, she was fighting for everyone who had ever been overlooked or underestimated. The project's success soon became undeniable. The client was thrilled, the team was thriving, and even upper management began to see her in a new light. But as her star rose, so did the tension with Mr. R. He was no longer just a thorn in her side, he was a threat, someone who couldn't accept her success and was determined to bring her down. The company's leadership had been closely watching the dynamic between the two, and what they saw raised serious concerns. It became clear that a reckoning was inevitable, one that would change everything. But how it would play out was still uncertain. Would Mr. R's attempts to sabotage her finally backfire? Or would his influence be enough to overshadow her achievements? And as the company prepared for the next phase of its transformation, who would come out on top? The answers were just around the corner, but for now, the tension remained unresolved, leaving everyone wondering what would happen next. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of meetings, decisions, and high-stakes negotiations. The success of the project had placed her firmly in the spotlight, and there was no denying the buzz around her performance. Upper management, impressed by her results and leadership style, began rethinking the dynamics within the company. Conversations about talent, fairness, and the importance of recognizing potential were taking place behind closed doors. Mr. R, however, wasn't giving up. He was careful to mask his disdain in public, but those closest to him noticed the strain. His influence was waning, and it was clear he felt the shift. For years, he had operated unchecked, his biases overlooked or ignored, but now the tide was turning. The leadership team had started asking questions not just about her demotion, but about the culture he had fostered in his department. The project's success was forcing them to re-evaluate everything. She remained focused, determined not to let Mr. R's actions distract her from what truly mattered. Her team had become a source of strength, their unity a testament to the environment she had cultivated. They celebrated small victories together, supported one another during setbacks, and worked tirelessly to exceed expectations. The bond they shared was something Mr. R had never been able to create, and it was what set her apart. One day, as she was wrapping up a meeting, she was called into an impromptu discussion with the company's senior leadership. The atmosphere was serious but not unwelcoming. They asked her pointed questions about her experience, her goals, and the challenges she had faced since joining the company. She answered honestly, her voice steady despite the gravity of the moment. She spoke about the importance of fairness, the value of recognizing potential, and the need for leaders to lift others up instead of tearing them down. When the meeting ended, she walked out with a sense of cautious optimism. She didn't know what decisions were being made, but she felt she had finally been heard. A week later, the announcement came. Mr. R was stepping down from his position. Officially, it was framed as a decision to pursue other opportunities, but everyone knew the truth. His inability to adapt, coupled with his treatment of employees, had made his position untenable. It was a quiet but definitive end to his reign. The same day, she received a call from the CEO. She had been offered the role. Mr. R had vacated a promotion that placed her at the helm of the department she had once been demoted from. It was a surreal moment, the culmination of years of perseverance and hard work. Accepting the role wasn't just about personal achievement, it was about proving that fairness, integrity, and competence could triumph over prejudice. When the news broke, reactions across the office were mixed. Many celebrated her promotion, thrilled to see someone so deserving finally get the recognition she had earned. Others, still wary of change, watched from the sidelines. As for Mr. R, he left quietly, his departure marked by little more than a few awkward goodbyes. Stepping into her new role, she faced challenges she had anticipated and others she hadn't. Repairing the damage left by Mr. R's leadership was no small task. There were strained relationships to mend, processes to improve, and a culture to rebuild. But she approached each obstacle with the same resilience that had carried her through the toughest moments of her career. Her first move was to implement changes that prioritized collaboration and growth. She opened lines of communication that had long been closed, creating an environment where every voice could be heard. Slowly but surely, the department began to transform. Morale improved, productivity soared, and the team flourished under her guidance. Meanwhile, her personal journey wasn't lost on those around her. Her rise from demoted employee to department head became a source of inspiration for others in the company. She often found herself approached by colleagues seeking advice or encouragement, and she made it a point to mentor those who showed potential, just as others had done for her along the way. Reflecting on her journey, she realized that her story wasn't just about overcoming a single prejudiced boss. It was about the larger fight to create spaces where talent and hard work are valued above all else. It was about proving that even in the face of bias, persistence and integrity can lead to meaningful change. In the months that followed, the company continued to evolve. Leadership took steps to address systemic issues, implementing new policies aimed at fostering diversity and inclusion. Her voice became an integral part of these discussions, and she was determined to ensure that no one else would have to face the same obstacles she had. The final chapter of her story didn't end with a dramatic confrontation or a perfect resolution, but with something far more powerful: progress. She had risen above the challenges, turned setbacks into stepping stones, and left an indelible mark on the company she once thought might break her spirit. Looking back, she often thought about the moment she was demoted, the way her world had seemed to crumble around her. It would have been easy to give up, to let the bitterness consume her. But instead, she chose to fight. And in doing so, she not only changed her own life but paved the way for others to follow. As she stood in her new office, overlooking the bustling workspace below, she allowed herself a small smile. This wasn't the end of her journey, far from it. It was simply the beginning of a new chapter, one where she could finally lead with the fairness, compassion, and strength she had always believed in.